The night I spilled champagne on a billionaire, I honestly thought I was going to get fired on the spot, not end up saving his life and helping tear down the shiny charity with his face on every billboard. And if you told me back then that one day I'd be running what replaced it with my own name on the paperwork, I would have asked what you were drinking and why you weren't sharing. My name is Tiana Brooks. I used to be the Black Maid. People waved past in hotels without making eye contact. The girl who refilled glasses and wiped up messes and blended into wallpaper. And I was just trying to keep my little brother Malik fed and safe and quiet in a world that did not have space for kids like him. That gala at the Harborview Grand was supposed to be just another long night, in uncomfortable shoes, rich folks in sequins raising glasses to access to care for all, while the staff inhaled whatever was left on the buffet in the back. You know what I mean? But that was the night I walked down a cold service corridor with a tray of champagne flutes and accidentally heard two men planning a murder like it was just a line on a spreadsheet. I remember it so clearly, the door to the VIP lounge was cracked open. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. I was just trying not to spill anything then. I heard that low voice say, "Once he raises that glass, it's done, Cole won't see sunrise." And another one asked, "He know?" And the first guy said, "He knows enough, he found the transfers, maybe the emails, just make sure he drinks." My stomach went cold, because I knew exactly who they meant. Ethan Cole, tech, golden boy turned philanthropist. The man whose giant smiling face was on the banner over the ballroom. Mr. Cole Hope Trust himself pacing around, rehearsing some speech about hope while his own people were getting ready to poison his toast. I remember thinking, Tiana, mind your business. You have a 10-year-old autistic little brother asleep on a bench in the staff room with his headphones on and a busted tablet. You cannot die for a billionaire who doesn't even know your name, but then I pictured Malik's face if I had to explain that I watched a man get killed when I could have said something, and suddenly minding my business felt worse than the fear. I didn't have a plan, I just had a pen and one of those little order pads in my apron, so I wrote the only thing I could think of with hands that would not stop shaking. Don't drink. Leave now. They know you know. 8 words. That was it, no legal brief, no explanation. And I folded it into the smallest square and palmed it like it was evidence in some movie, then walked out into the chandelier light, like my knees were not made of jelly. One of the waiters was already making a beeline for Ethan, with a single glass of champagne, the fatal one. If these men were telling the truth, so I cut across the marble floor, tripped over nothing, and dumped a whole tray of champagne down the front of his $1,000 jacket. People gasped, somebody laughed. Strings kept playing. Rich folks looked outraged on cue, and I was mumbling, "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me get that," dabbing at his sleeve, while my heart banged so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I had maybe 3 seconds with my hands near him, and in those 3 seconds I slipped that folded note into his palm, like I'd been doing this my whole life. Right then my manager's voice cracked across the ballroom like a whip, Tiana. And here comes Mr. Klein with his red face and clipped tie and cheap authority grabbing my arm and barking, "You clumsy, useless girl. You just embarrassed this hotel in front of our biggest donor. Get out of my sight." And everyone's watching him drag the maid away, like props being moved off stage, and nobody is thinking, "Hey, maybe this is weird," because that's just how it is. While he yanked me toward the back, I let my body go with it, leaned forward just enough so my fingers brushed Ethan's hand one last time. Felt the paper leave my palm, and then I didn't look back until we were almost through the staff door, just long enough to see him look down, unfold the note, and go very, very still. I was standing alone in a dim hallway, 10 minutes later, Klein having dropped a tray in my arms and told me to turn in my badge after the event. My whole future apparently hanging on one clumsy fall and 8 words, when I heard footsteps behind me and a voice that did not sound panicked, just precise, say, "Don't turn around." I froze with my hand on the wall, and he said, "I read your note." And a second later, Ethan Cole stepped around in front of me. No PR smile, just these sharp, tired eyes that had clearly seen too much in one night. "If that was some kind of joke," he said, "it's not funny," and I laughed. One of those bitter laughs that sound like they hurt. "If that was a joke, I'd be fired already." I told him I heard two men by the VIP lounge. They were talking about your glass, about how you found transfers. They said you wouldn't make it to morning. I don't know their names. I'm just the girl carrying drinks. He studied me like he was weighing my heartbeat, then asked, "Why warn me you don't know me?" And I shrugged, because what else do you do? Because I'm tired of watching rich men bury poor people, I guess. And I didn't want your murder on my conscience, that's all. He looked past me down the hallway toward the ballroom, then back at me, and something in his shoulders softened. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" "Tiana," he asked, first time he used my name. And I almost lied, but I thought of Malik in that break room, feet swinging, headphones on, totally dependent on me. So I said, "My little brother's here. He waits on a bench with his tablet. He doesn't do well with strangers or sudden changes. I work nights because there's nobody else." Ethan didn't do that thing where people act sad for a second and then move on. He just nodded once like a conclusion clicked. "Then we get him first," he said, "and then we disappear before whoever poured that drink decides to try Plan B." Next thing I know, we're walking down the staff hallway together, passing rolling carts and buckets and all the behind the scenes. Reality people try not to think about. And Malik is right where I left him, hoodie half-zipped, headphones, crooked eyes lighting up when he sees me tea. He says, "Did you bring fries?" Like that's the only problem in the world. And I kneel and kiss his forehead and tell him, "We're leaving early, baby, grab your stuff." Ethan shrugs off his tux jacket and drapes it over Malik's shoulders without making a big thing of it. "It's cold outside," he says, and Malik looks up at this billionaire he's only ever seen on screens. Then smiles this shy little smile that makes something in my chest crack. We cut into a concrete stairwell that smells like mop water and old paint, while upstairs they're probably wondering why Ethan Cole never came back on stage. And by the time we hit the garage, he's unlocking this black SUV that looks like money had money, saying, "Get in," not in that spoiled rich guy way, but like someone who has already decided we're his responsibility now. I hesitated with my hand on the door because I didn't know this man, except from headlines and some messy charity commercial. But I looked at Malik in his huge jacket. I looked at the ballroom lights reflected on the concrete, and I thought, if they're willing to kill him over this, they will not think twice about a maid and her brother, so I got in. He didn't take us to some penthouse tower with a glass elevator and a concierge. He took us to a fourth-floor walk, up in a neighborhood. I actually recognized old brick loud radiators, a corner store on the block that sells everything from phone chargers to church shoes. And when he opened the door, it felt like stepping into a life he'd had before. All the cameras. Worn leather couch, mismatched mugs, a gallery wall of slightly crooked pictures that looked like they meant something. He set Malik up with a blanket and a cartoon at low volume, then sat at this little kitchen table and pulled out a metal lockbox. And that's when I realized he'd been investigating his own foundation long before anyone tried to kill him. He spread out bank statements and vendor lists, lines highlighted in yellow names of clinics that never got equipment invoices to companies that didn't exist, and he said, "This is supposed to be the Cole Hope Trust. We're supposed to be sending mobile clinics into neighborhoods like the one I grew up in, but somebody's been stealing." And when I finally started asking the right questions, anonymous email pops up saying, "Stop digging or you'll be buried with it." And then tonight, my champagne almost kills me, so here we are. I told him the truth, that from where I stood, it looked like he'd been trying to build the perfect case nice and clean, while the people he trusted were already quietly sliding a coffin into place. And he actually laughed, tired but real. "You're saying I'm late to my own party," he said. And I said, "I'm saying they don't care about clean, they care about fast." And that's how I ended up sitting at a billionaire's kitchen table helping plan a break-in on his own office, while my little brother fell asleep under his jacket. Ethan called in backup. Ray McMillan, ex-cop, now private investigator with a sense of humor that made you feel safer than you probably were. And when Ray heard my story about the VIP lounge, he didn't question it. He just said, "Yeah, that tracks dirty money, always thinks it's invisible." Then he pulled out a slim transmitter and said, "Tomorrow there's a quiet board strategy session on the 41st floor. Not on the official calendar, not open to staff, which is exactly where the real talk happens. They use outside catering. I can get you on the list. You slip this under the table. I'll be in a van with headphones, and we find out who's trying to put our boy in the ground. I'm a maid, not a spy." But the more I looked at that transmitter and those bank statements, and the more I thought about Malik's name someday ending up on some quiet little internal list of liabilities, the more I knew that if I walked away, I'd spend the rest of my life waiting for a knock at the door, so I said yes. The next day, I was in a crisp white shirt and black vest again, but this time my badge said Mia Collins, Langford Catering. And my heart had a permanent stutter riding a freight elevator up to a floor I had no business being on. The conference room looked like every slick boardroom you've seen on TV. Long table leather chairs, city skyline posing in the windows, that little forest-scented centerpiece in the middle, and I rolled in a coffee cart like I'd done 1,000 times, hands steady, because they had to be. While no one was watching, I adjusted the pastries, slid my hand under the polished table edge, pressed the transmitter to the underside until I heard a tiny click, and forced myself not to exhale like I'd just diffused a pommon. Of course, that's when Charles Benton walked in sniffing like something smelled off, and I saw this flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You were at the gala. You're the one who spilled on Ethan," he said. And I swear my bones tried to evaporate, but my voice stayed soft. "We work a lot of events, sir. They sent me where they needed staff." And he held out his hand for my badge. While he squinted at my fake name and company logo, Olivia Sharp, head of PR, walked in these heels that sounded like judgment, and said, "Charles, you harassing the help again. She's catering, let her do her job. We have bigger fires," and just like that, I was invisible again, which for once was a blessing. Back at Ethan's place, Ray had set up his laptop, a receiver, and a speaker on the coffee table. And when the board's voices came through that tiny transmitter under the table, it felt like we'd opened a window into a house we'd only ever seen from the sidewalk. Preston Graham's voice was smooth, so controlled, it made my teeth hurt. "Let's address Ethan's absence. He's off the grid. No press, no staff. Contact." Another board member said he was concerned. Olivia said they'd spin it as exhaustion or sabbatical, and Charles, still salty about his ego bruises, asked, "What about that waitress, the one from the gala?" And Olivia laughed, said, "No one takes catering seriously, focus." And they went right back to planning how to vote. Ethan out, bury the missing money, and blame everything on him if he ever dared to come back. Listening to them talk like that about him, about staff, about patients who were just numbers on their risk reports, I felt something in me shift from scared to angry, like I'd been living my life on mute, and suddenly someone turned the volume up. If I had ever doubted whether slipping that note into Ethan's hand was worth it, that doubt died right there. That audio gave us enough to make noise, but not enough to burn the whole house down. Which is why we broke into his office at night and opened the vault behind the fake bookcase. Why we hauled out folders and hard drives while Ray jammed the cameras. Why a security guard coughing in a hallway full of smoke is still one of the scariest sounds I've ever heard, but that's also why, a few days later, I was sitting in a safe house watching an independent journalist named Laura Vega lay it all out in a video that blew up the internet. She had verified the files, traced shell companies, cross-checked signatures, and she told the world that the Cole Hope Trust had lost millions that never reached the people they were supposed to help. Then she played parts of that board meeting audio, and then Ethan showed up at the end of the video. No perfect lighting, and said, "Built this thing to help people who never get seen, and somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing too. I trusted the wrong people. That's on me. The crimes are on them. Here's the truth. Do what you want with it." People did a lot with it. Hashtags think pieces, calls for audits, lawyers on TV panels arguing over intent and complicity. But just when it looked like public opinion was turning into a wave that was finally going to wash some of these people out of their high-rise offices, another leak dropped, this time from way back, before Ethan took over, internal documents showing clinics turning away Black and Latino patients, PR teams faking success numbers, nurses being punished for speaking up. Headlines twisted like knives. Rot at the roots. Did Cole know about racist policies, hero founder, or just another face on a broken system? And I could see it land on Ethan like a physical weight, because even if the dates said it started before him, the names on the letterhead still said Cole Hope Trust. Ray slammed his phone on the table and said, "They're trying to drag you down with the original sin of this place. You didn't write those policies." And Ethan just looked at the screen and said, "But I benefited from a system that never told me they existed, and that's not exactly a clean conscience either." He could have gotten real lawyered up at that point, could have gone quiet. Let statements and spokespeople do the talking. But instead, he did the one thing no one on his side of town ever does. He went live again and said, "Those documents, they hurt to read because they show a place with my name on it, choosing donors over dying kids who look like Tiana and Malik's long before I got here. I didn't know, and not knowing is my failure. I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness. I'm going to ask whether we should rebuild this or just let it die and start something better." That was the twist I didn't see coming when I was the maid sneaking a note into his hand. Not that we'd end up in court with his board chair facing prison. Not that we'd stand at a memorial wall reading the names of people this machine chewed up and spit out, but that a man like him would decide it was better to lose his statue than defend it with half-truths. Eventually, the government did what it does when public pressure gets too loud. Raids, charges, subpoenas, all of that. And I sat in a courtroom and watched Preston Graham listen to victims talk about husbands who died waiting on treatments, interns who were threatened into silence, neighborhoods that never saw the mobile clinics they were promised. Then I walked up to that microphone with my heart pounding and told the judge I was never supposed to be in this world. I was the maid, cleaning up spilled champagne while these people made decisions. I saved Ethan's life because I heard something I wasn't supposed to, and I did something anyway. There are thousands of people who saw things and kept quiet because they thought no one would believe them or protect them. So whatever you do today, just don't pretend we were invisible. Graham got 27 years. Some people cheered, some people said it wasn't enough, some people said white-collar crime doesn't belong in prison at all. And you can argue that in the comments if you want. But the part that mattered most to me was when the judge ordered that his remaining assets and the carcass of the Cole Hope Trust had to be used to fund a new network of clinics under new management. The government asked Ethan if he wanted to oversee the reformed foundation, and he said no. You can't fix a rotten house by repainting the walls. He told the cameras, you have to decide if the foundation itself deserves to stand. Instead, he and Laura and a bunch of former nurses drivers, admin staff and community organizers sat around tables in borrowed church basements and asked what something built on truth would even look like. And somehow my name ended up on that list too, because I guess once you've broken into a boardroom and outrun men with guns in a warehouse full of stolen medical equipment, people figure you're committed. We called it the Hollow Street Collective, named after a nurse whose objection letter we found buried deep in those vault papers, a woman who had written, "If we keep choosing comfort for donors over care for dying children, then we have forgotten why we exist," and then vanished from the payroll a few weeks later. We etched her name into stone at a small memorial in a park, along with a long list of patients and staff and whistleblowers who were erased along the way, and I watched families lay flowers at the base of that wall and thought, this is what it means to say someone's name out loud after the world told them to be quiet. We opened our first clinic in a neighborhood that had been labeled too risky in those old documents. No donor hallway, no glossy portraits, just a hand-painted sign that said, "No one forgotten," and a waiting room where the chairs actually fit the people who had to sit in them. Malik cut the ribbon with a grin so big it almost didn't fit his face, and now he draws these big, colorful houses with no doors, just open walls. And when you ask him why, he just shrugs and says, "So no one gets left outside," and honestly, I think that's better than any mission statement we could have paid a consultant for. These days, Ethan teaches nonprofit ethics at a community college 2 nights a week. He jokes that his syllabus is just, "Here's everything I did wrong, let's not repeat it, I run the collective," which mostly means spreadsheets and staffing and arguing with suppliers about the price of inhalers. Ray still shows up with bad coffee and good instincts, and Laura keeps publishing stories that make powerful people sleep badly. I still think about that night at the Harborview, about how many small moments like that turn into life and death without anyone knowing. And I think about how close I came to staying silent, because I was scared, because I was tired, because I'd been trained to believe that my job was to disappear so other people's lives could go on uninterrupted. So now I'm going to throw this back to you, since you've listened to me spill my whole life out like this. Do you think a guy like Ethan deserves a second chance after standing on top of a system that was hurting people, even if he truly didn't know how deep it went? Or do you think people like me should have walked away and let the whole thing burn without helping him rebuild anything at all? Have you ever been the invisible person in a room where big decisions were being made? Maybe the server, the assistant, the intern, and you saw something wrong and had to decide whether to speak up or keep your head down. Did anyone listen when you did, or did they make you feel crazy for noticing? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Tell me if you think I did the right thing, or if you're still mad I didn't burn it all to the ground. And if you've ever been treated like background in your own story, this is your space. Say what you wish someone had heard the first time.